Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics Football. It's Fran here, and we'll be kind of looking at a very short Game Week 5 team selection. Now, of course, there was a very short turnaround between Game Week 4 and Game Week 5, and as you guys all know, kind of bad news off of Game Week 5 was the fact that coming off a wild card, I have several kind of issues that I had to deal with that I didn't really anticipate, and that would have been DCL's injury, and that kind of being slightly kind of medium to long term, whereas Antonio managed to kind of bag himself a red card. Now, I think what this game week calls for is a bit of patience and also kind of a little bit of balancing between whether you actually want to go for points and maximize on that, and whether you want to practice a bit of FOMO, to be honest, because at this point in time, I think a lot of our competitors or even people who are playing FPL avidly would be looking at maybe replacing Antonio for someone like Jimenez, and then also replacing DCL for someone like Bamford, and that would obviously involve a kind of -4 hit. At times, I think if people don't have the issue of DCL, they might be also looking to kind of move away from Ben Rama as well, moving into Rafinha. I personally, of course, have all three of these players who I've kind of mentioned, who are in the mix in terms of being looked at for kind of transfer options. And I think, as I said, I do want to practice patience, and I don't think that it's necessary to take a -4 hit right now. I think whilst Jimenez might have a nice kind of game week ahead himself, I still think he's played a much more deeper role this year that has kind of also shown some kind of talents that he has in terms of creative player. And I think the role he has in his team is slightly different to when he was a target man for Nuno. It's not just the fact that Wolves are kind of like constantly building these crosses for him. It's clear now that there are players who can run in behind, and you can see that with the kind of role that Traore plays. Instead of playing like an out-and-out right winger, he's almost playing like at times kind of a fast striker, and he will sometimes start from the left or start from the right, but be allowed the opportunity to kind of run directly at defenses through the center. And we see that as well, like on the other side from Semedo too. And I think that's kind of the beauty of what Jimenez plays in the system and why he also continues to play. And you'll also see that Hwang Hee-chan can kind of slot in as well for Traore at times. And that shows the kind of change in the role of Traore, but also the change in the role of Jimenez. And I think that is partially the reason why he hasn't really gotten any of the hauls that we expected. At the same time, I think when you look at Jimenez, his expected goals, per game hasn't really been tremendous. I think Wolves have played fantastic games, and actually their expected goals as a team have been great. But the key issue with Wolves is actually picking the correct attacking asset, and I think the actual answer is by picking none of them, you'll probably benefit. I think that when maybe things change, someone like Pedro Neto, who's a much more clinical finisher, comes in. He kind of reminds me of the role that Gray is playing right now for Everton, where he is happy to have maybe slightly less touches of the ball, but when he has the ball, he's extremely direct and is always looking to attack the defense and the keeper. And that's why we've seen, for example, you look at that chance that Gray took versus Burnley. That's the exact same chance that Traore had versus Tottenham, and completely kind of whiffed into kind of Lloris's fingertips. And that really is what it comes down to. I think you shouldn't just trust XG as a kind of blank stat. You have to also make sure that you actually watch the players. And whilst I'm not saying that Jimenez is incapable of scoring, I think he's a fantastic player. And we saw, for example, him quite close to getting a header as well in the last week. It's just the case that I think Bamford right now is still getting those chances that I like seeing. Yes, they've had some tough games. Yes, they've also had some very poor games. For example, a draw being Burnley being one of them, with Burnley being one of them. And that is a point of concern. But I don't think it's a point of concern where you can say like, oh, we don't have to go into Leeds at all. I think there's a concern for me to go into 2 Leeds players, which is why I didn't practice any kind of, kind of rushedness in terms of moving into like Rafinha, right, and doubling up on Leeds right now. I think the fixtures are wonderful, yes, but the fixtures are wonderful for a plentiful amount of teams in the league, especially a team like Arsenal as well, who, of course, after being laughed off for the first few games, have some nice fixtures, have Burnley, for example, coming up next. If you have, let's say, the capacity to go into some Arsenal players, it could be interesting, maybe Pepe and Aubameyang being more of those players. I think Saka is someone who plays a little bit more of an assistive role for the team in terms of driving the ball, carrying the ball forwards at times. But it's usually those kind of talismans that I think at front, even Lacazette at times, if he's given the opportunity to actually play and actually score for Arsenal. But me, personally, of course, you can see that I have Bamford in my team, and the sole reason, as I say, is that I still think he is getting those numbers that I like, and I think he's still putting in the attempts per game that I think where he will eventually haul. Whereas Jimenez has slightly worse numbers in that department, and I have the ability in terms of budget to do so. Also, that kind of 0.6 million in the bank will go in hand with, for example, the transfer of Ronaldo out for Lukaku eventually, and I'll have enough money to maybe kind of improve on my defense potentially. You also see that part of the reason why I'm practicing patience this week is the fact that I do think that, Norwich can really capitalize on what is, I think, one of the worst attacking teams right now in the league. I think, we haven't seen anything interesting from Watford or Norwich, to be honest, both of these teams on an attacking front. And it's not unsurprising that both of these teams are at the bottom of the table hand in hand with XG. And that's why I think there's a strong chance that I could actually get away with Williams here at 4.0 and get a clean sheet from him potentially. If Norwich are ever going to get a clean sheet this season, I think it's probably versus Watford. Now, of course, last season I think they had a tough go versus Watford, and I think they did struggle versus someone like Sarr. And I think this could be a good week where if you're looking for a one-week punt, maybe Sarr is interesting. But as I said, I have more pressing priorities in my team, and that's pretty much why I've gone for the setup that I have. A lot of you guys will also be questioning why I have Christensen in my team still, or whether I'm still worried about Christensen. And I think, simply put, the assessment has to be the fact that Tuchel is very happy to rotate with his team. He has a very, very deep squad. Lukaku is one of those set and forget players that, if he, for example, gets injured, then Chelsea will be in some trouble. I think you can see that he's actually unlocked Chelsea in many different ways. Look at the Aston Villa game. Their XG wasn't fantastic, but they were world-class goals created by both Kovacic and Lukaku himself, really, with his ability to actually drive at defenses, stop and start as a striker and carry the ball, and also take the shot at the right opportunity. And we saw that as well with his movement when he kind of looked for the cross from Azpilicueta in the Champions League versus Zenit. And that pretty much shows you why Chelsea is so interesting this season. They really are a completely stacked team. But that also means that we are going to suffer if we go for players like Reece James, who could be rotated, for example, with someone like Azpilicueta, for example, or even Hudson-Odoi. Marcos Alonso has to deal with Chilwell, who likely will come in eventually. I don't know when the time is right. The next game is versus Tottenham, and I think Tuchel will probably try to play his best side. In my opinion, that still includes Christensen inside, but I could be wrong about that, and that would worry me because, of course, Livramento is going to come into my team. I think in that situation, I probably would have to once again listen to the press conferences and see if I might want to make a panic adjustment in terms of any of the other players on my team, such as someone like Antonio, finally maybe going for Jimenez if I absolutely have to. But I really do want to practice the patience because, as I said, there are some other options in the league that I think interest me outside of Wolves, outside of Leeds as well, who are basically what people are constantly looking at right now. I think you can actually look at someone like Conor Gallagher. He is extremely interesting. His underlying numbers in terms of XG and XJ are exactly there, and I think you want to have a player like that in the future game weeks where he also gives you the flexibility to kind of move into a back four. Because when we look at game week 7 onwards, we're talking about a scenario where maybe Liverpool, City, and Chelsea all have fantastic options for us to have in our backlines. And there could be really an opportunity for us to have a flexible kind of player, such as Conor Gallagher, who maybe we drop it when he's versus a big team like Man City, and we move into a back four at times. But that's pretty much how I feel right now. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful game week ahead. A wildcard video will be dropping soon, and later tonight I will be also dropping a team sheet, a cheat sheet selection. Sorry. Thanks.